Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams. Today I have a couple of articles that deal with conspiracies and things beyond our knowing. The first article we'll be reading is The Ace of Spades, an image tied to mystery, fear, and secrecy. Let's read this article and then, let's read the next one after that and we'll have a great time. History has shown that military agencies and the world of clandestine secret activity go together hand in glove. A perfect example can be found in a May 1967 file with the intriguing title of Vietnam PSYOP Directive, the use of superstitions in psychological operations in Vietnam. While the file covers a wealth of previously classified U.S. Army operations, one particular section really stands out from all of the rest. It is focused upon a near-elite band of warriors who chose to scare North Vietnamese personnel with the imagery of the Ace of Spades from a deck of cards. As for the reasons, consider the following words from the file in question. A strong superstition or a deeply held belief shared by a substantial number of the enemy target audience can be used as a psychological weapon because it permits with some degree of probability the prediction of individual or group behavior under a given set of conditions. To use an enemy superstition as a starting point for psychological operations, however, one must be sure of the conditions and control the stimuli that trigger the desired behavior. The first step in the manipulation of a superstition as an enemy vulnerability is its exact identification and detailed definition of its spread and intensity among the target audience. The second step is to ensure friendly control of the stimuli and the capability to create a situation that will trigger the desired superstitious behavior. Both conditions must be met or the PSYOP's psychological operations effect will not yield the desired results. It might even backfire. As an illustration, one can cite the recent notion spread among combat troops in the First Corps area that VC and NVN troops were deathly afraid of the Ace of Spades as an omen of death. In consequence, soldiers turned Psi warriors, with the assistance of playing card manufacturers, began leaving the ominous card in battle areas and on patrols into enemy-held territory. The notion was based on isolated instances of behavior among Montagnard tribesmen familiar from the French days with the Western deck of cards. A subsequent survey determined that the Ace of Spades does not trigger substantial fear reactions among most Vietnamese because the various local playing cards have their own set of symbols, generally of Chinese derivation. Here, then, was an incorrect identification of a superstition coupled with a friendly capability to exploit the presumed condition. It did not work. In summary, the manipulation of superstitions in a delicate affair, tampering with deeply held beliefs, seeking to turn them to your advantage, means in effect playing God, and it should only be attempted if one can get away with it, and the game is indeed worth the candle. Failure can lead to ridicule, charges of clumsiness and callousness that can blacken the reputation of psychological operations in general. It is a weapon to be employed selectively and with utmost skill and deftness. There can be no excuse for failure. The file makes it very clear that the strange operation did not have the effect that the military was hoping for. Nevertheless, the data most assuredly does reveal that when waging war, Uncle Sam employed some very strange tools. We're not quite done, however. It should be noted there is another aspect to the Ace of Spades image. On the night of September 12, 1952, something terrifying descended upon the small West Virginia town of Flatwoods. Precisely what it was remains a mystery. To this very day, all that can be said for sure is that it was a hideous, fear-inducing, and downright monstrous. It has appropriately become known as the Flatwoods Monster. Situated in Braxton County and dominated by a mountainous, forested landscape, Flatwoods is a distinctly small town. That much is apparent from the fact that today its population is less than 400. Back in 1952, it was even less. On the night in question, however, the town found its population briefly added to by one visitor from, well, no one really knows where it all began. As the sun was setting on what was a warm, still September evening, a group of boys from Flatwoods were playing football in the town's schoolyard when they were frozen to the spot by the sight of a brightly lit, fiery object that shot overhead, provoking amazement and wonder in the process. All that the boys could be sure of was that the object appeared to be either egg-shaped or circular. Its color fluctuated from orange to a fiery red. As the stunned children watched in awe, they saw the object begin to descend at a high rate of speed, no less, and then appear to come down on one of Flatwood's largest hilltops. Not surprisingly, being kids, they saw this as a big adventure looming large. The result, they, with a woman named Kathleen May and a recent U.S. Army recruit Eugene Lemon, headed off for the scene of all the action. It wasn't long before the group reached the hill in question, and with nightfall rapidly closing in, the first thing the group noticed as they reached The darkened peak was something brightly lit within the trees. What it was, no one had a clue, but it clearly wasn't the lights of a farmhouse, truck, or car. Suddenly the air was filled with a sickening odor, not unlike that of a devilish brimstone. That was not a good sign to their credit. However, they pushed on, determined to figure out the true nature of the source behind the lights. They soon found out, as the air became filled with a strange sizzling sound. Nothing less than a pair of self-illuminated red eyes could be seen getting even closer. Kathleen May had the presence of mind to bring a flashlight with her, and she quickly focused it on the eyes. In doing so, she also lit up the abominable creature that possessed those fiery eyes, looming before the now hysterical band of intrepid souls. One was an approximately 10-foot tall floating monster which appeared to be humanoid in shape and which had a large black cowling behind its head. That gave the entire head a kind of ace of spades appearance, and that was possibly even cloaked. Coincidence or a secret connection? Whatever the answer, it's a fascinating and mysterious saga. Indeed, folks, maybe that you can see here, maybe the Flatwoods monster was indeed maybe some sort of government psyop, with basically it having a similar shape to the ace of spades. But that, folks, is, well, just a theory. But it's an interesting theory, but we have so much more to go through, folks, so let's get on to the next article. Titled, Scientists Unravel Mystery of Russia's Biological Chernobyl. Let's get into it now, folks, and hear exactly what took place in Russia. In 1979, one of the worst biological weapons disasters on record was nearly swept under the rug of history by the Soviet military. Soviet scientists were researching chemical and biological weapons at a secret research facility in Sverdlovsk when they accidentally released a deadly strain of anthrax bacteria. It is estimated that around 100 people and hundreds of livestock died as a result of the leak. Although the Soviet government naturally obfuscated all ensuing investigations, the exact death toll remains unknown. Here we have a photo of Alvatina Nekrasova, who visits the grave of her father, Vasily Ivanov, one of the first victims of the outbreak, folks. As everyone can see from this evidence, folks, this disaster affected many, many people. The official cover story at the time was that tainted meat had been released on the public, but a 1994 study by Harvard historians concluded that aerosol anthrax was indeed the cause. Despite that revelation, the exact nature of the anthrax involved has remained a mystery in the 37 years since its release. Quite interesting what we've learned here, folks, and a disaster, I should remind you, that's largely overlooked due to the larger Chernobyl nuclear incident. But still, this is quite devastating. But let's continue with the article, folks. Now, a new study led by genetics researchers Paul Kayam of Northern Arizona University has successfully sequenced the entire genome of the anthrax involved in this military disaster, and what was found is surprising. While it was assumed that the anthrax involved must have been genetically modified in order to weaponize it, researchers found evidence to the contrary. The Soviet Sverdlovsk strain genome is consistent with a wild-type strain from Russia that had no evidence of genetic manipulation during its industrial production. While it is known that Soviet scientists had genetically manipulated Bacillus anthracis with the potential to evade vaccine prophylaxis and antibiotic therapeutics, there was no genomic evidence of this from the Sverdlovsk production strain genome. To reach this conclusion, researchers conducted autopsies on known victims of the Sverdlovsk disaster in order to isolate specimens of the specific anthrax strain Bacillus anthracis. The genome sequenced in this research is consistent with wild strains of anthrax, which commonly infect livestock populations. Now that scientists know the composition of this bioweapon, government forces could be more prepared to respond to any future biological attacks if one of these weapons might somehow get into the hands of terrorists. Hopefully, this finding could also help close some of the festering wounds still lingering from the Cold War. Perhaps those Soviet scientists weren't as nefarious as we thought. Wait, we were the bad guys all along? No, we were not, folks. They were still working on a bioweapon. In fact, unfortunately, everyone, a lot of countries are now involved in biological warfare. I mean, I can bring up COVID and China as one example. Anyway, folks, we're at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics, they're bad for you. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions of the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell that will give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video. So be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks. I'll see you all again soon.